morning. I'm pleased to stand here today with our exceptionally important public safety partner, the Chief of Police. We're going to be discussing an approach that all of us should be riveted on, and that is taking every step we can to grapple with our gun violence crisis, because we continue to have an emergency when it comes to public safety and gun violence, and our office is taking an array of significant approaches to try to combat it. Today, I'm announcing that we're taking action once again. We have filed a nuisance abatement lawsuit that I want to talk about in some depth against the alleged owners and operators of an apartment building in South Los Angeles. It's one of several such actions that we have announced just in the past couple weeks. This is part of a concerted effort by our office. Regarding this property, we contend it's a stronghold for the violent Avalon 40s street gang. We allege the building has been allowed to become a flashpoint for violence in the neighborhood. There have been two shootings connected with this property, numerous arrests for illegal gun possession, and a large cache of weapon and munitions has been found at this site. And here is a key point. It's a key point about this action and others that we filed in recent days. This action relates to a building that's 1,000 feet from two schools and two parks. Students have just been returning to the classroom. It's obviously really important that kids be safe at school, but let's focus on the importance of kids being safe on their way to and from school. We're taking action today. We're taking action to shut down the violence at this property once and for all. And let me give you a little context for the lawsuit that I'm discussing today with Chief Moore. We have filed 167 actions like this since I've been city attorney. We've recovered more than $3.4 million worth of penalties and fines. We've secured 358 injunctions in the context of these actions. And it's really telling, the next statistic I'm going to describe to you, because it again underscores the importance of this work. Of those lawsuits, nearly 100 of the properties were within 1,000 feet of a school. Of these actions, 50 of these properties were within, 40 of these properties were within 500 feet of a school. Picture if you are a parent of a child heading to school near one of these properties. This action at this time, as we're commencing the school year, is very significant. Let me talk about the details of it. Property is on 41st Street, it's near Avalon and 41st. It's a 6-unit apartment building. It's allegedly one of the most dangerous buildings in the Newton division. And because that's true, it requires LAPD to go to this building constantly. Over the past 2 years, there have been at least 8 arrests for illegal firearm possession, in which assault weapons, semi-automatic weapons have been recovered, at least one ghost gun, and you see here, what you see depicted next to me are a couple of the weapons that were confiscated at this property, one of which is a ghost gun. And recall that ghost gun means that it's an unserialized gun, purposely designed so it can't be traced. There have been 2 shootings associated with this building. The sidewalk in front of this building has been covered with gang graffiti that is designed to send a signal to everybody in the neighborhood that Avalon 40s controls this property. One of the apartments is vacant, and we allege that's a location in which the gang members stash guns and other illegal activities take place there. In February, after a search warrant was executed, as I mentioned, several weapons, including these, were found, along with 300 rounds of ammunition and cocaine. In November of 2021, LAPD responded to a drive-by shooting in front of this property. The victim who'd been shot had himself been arrested for illegal activity, including possessing a military-style assault weapon. Previously, a tenant in the building reported a drive-by shooting in front of the property. Shooting happened, she's ducking, she and her kid fall to the floor to try to make sure that they're safe. Then they return to the property later and they see bullet holes in the drywall and in a window. That's the set of conditions that we're talking about at a property within 1,000 feet of 2 schools and 2 public parks. Picture what it feels like to live in a neighborhood where you walk by a property and the sidewalk is scrawled with graffiti, reminding you who says they're in charge of this neighborhood. Now, since 2019, this property has been owned by a trust, and a 22-year-old has been the trustee of the property. He was convicted of robbery and assault in March and arrested previously for possessing a loaded gun. He holds legal title, but we allege that his mother is really the person in charge and controlling the property. They're both defendants in the case. Here's what we seek. And this is indicative of what we do in all the cases I've been describing, these nuisance abatement lawsuits. We want an injunction that requires a set of physical changes at this property that won't require LAPD to continue to have to come after the fact to arrest people. So in the first instance, we can prevent illegal activity. We want a gate with electronic access to secure the building. We want internet-connected videos that can be monitored by LAPD. We want enhanced lighting and property management. We want all the graffiti to be removed. We want house rules for the tenants. We want screening of the tenants. We want armed licensed security guards at this property. We want this property to be safe once and for all. Let me introduce Chief Moore. You know, I've known Chief Moore for more than 20 years. He has been one of the most effective and important public safety leaders with a particular emphasis on combating gun violence since I have known him. I'm very proud that he is his partner and privileged to introduce him today. Chief?
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. And I'm privileged to work alongside a city attorney that, quote unquote, just frankly gets it. Policing and public safety is a shared responsibility of all of city government, of all of our communities. And to reduce gun violence and to turn the tide of what we've seen in the aftermath of this worst historic pandemic, where we've seen the proliferation of guns, the proliferation of shooting violence, of the loss of life, it's going to take a lot more than just policing. It's going to take a lot more than just simply officers going out, though difficult and dangerous, and making arrests, identifying and making arrests of those persons responsible and protecting the lives by removing these individuals from our communities. As is demonstrated in this injunction, we're out there doing that every day. And we're out there doing it very effectively in identifying those individuals that are responsible for this violence and others that are frankly living in fear and intimidation because of these operators. But in public safety, we know well in Los Angeles what works. And what works is a matter of a balanced approach of not just enforcement against the offender, but also identifying how we help victims, how we help those that are most often targeted by these thugs and by these criminal enterprises. And then lastly, what is the role of the landowner, the operator, the apartment owner, the business owner? Because it takes that type of triangle to actually make a crime, to actually allow a crime to happen. And what I'm particularly impressed by effectiveness of a city attorney and his team that pursues abatements is that they're going at that last element. We have apartment owners association across the city that understand what good business practices are. We have a concept that's well known throughout policing and through public safety called crime prevention through environmental design. This injunction is not asking for anything extraordinary. This injunction, frankly, is just asking for a business owner, for a property owner who is profiting from this intimidation and from this gang activity and from the violence to act within the boundaries of the law and human decency. For the other residents that live at this apartment building, do not live in fear and intimidation. For the people who live and property owners who operate in this neighborhood, to have a responsible property owner who's not profiting from this violence and from this illegal activity and from this constant source of fear. So I'm fully behind this, as every man and woman in our department. What frustrates policing, what frustrates our people as they work the street, is when we see other parts of the criminal justice system, including prosecutors and judges and others, who don't act within their power, who don't use the authorities that are given to them, for offenders who are chronically preying upon others. So with this, it has our full support, our gratitude. These 3 locations that I most recently reviewed as part of more than 160 actions will improve the safety of this neighborhood, will improve a sense that the public can trust its government, not just policing, but it can trust its government to do everything within its power to cause people to act within the boundaries of law. This is a country of laws, it's a country of rules, of a code of conduct, and we need to follow it. Unfortunately, in this instance, it's going to take a court intervention, but I'm grateful that there's many more others that are applauding this effort and looking forward to the court's action to bring this property up to code and to bring it up to a standard so that we can all enjoy a safer community. City Attorney Fuhrer, thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Chief. I mentioned earlier this is part of a larger context. Let's talk about that for a second. In recent weeks, I mentioned this past couple of weeks, I have indicated that we filed now 3 of these actions as part of the more than 160 that we have filed. The other 2 bear mention because of the similarity that they have to this property in a key respect. We filed a case regarding a property in the Southeast Division on Graham Street, 9910 Graham Street. And that's a case where the property is 500 feet from an elementary school where 280 kindergartners through 8th graders go. And it's 189 feet from a senior citizen center. And yet this summer, in one of many gun violence incidents, there was a bullet fired from the property that went through the next door neighbor's house, missing somebody on the couch by inches. We filed that action, seeking similar steps that will assure that the neighborhood isn't terrorized by gun violence. And then just a few days ago, we announced the filing of a lawsuit about a property that is across the street from an elementary school, where we allege there's rampant drug sales, PCP, crack cocaine, across the street from a school. School's just opened a little more than a week ago. My kids went K through 12 to LAUSD schools. If my kids were attending a school where drug sales were happening across the street, where gun violence was a regular occurrence within a block or 2 of the school, you can be sure that I and other parents at the school would collectively organize and express our outrage and demand change. But one fact of life that underscores the importance of the teamwork that's exemplified today is that in the neighborhoods in which we filed these actions, people live in fear and are often very concerned about retaliation. So I want to underscore for anybody who is having an issue like these in their neighborhood, you can report anonymously to our office online at lacityattorney.org. You can also call us at 978-8340, 213-978-8340. Every child and every family in our city deserves to live in a safe neighborhood. No one should have to tolerate the conditions that we allege in this and other cases we filed recently. But we're going to continue to fight to assure that these neighborhoods have hope. Let me say a few words in Spanish, then I'm happy to take questions. La violencia armada sigue siendo una emergencia de seguridad pública en Los Ángeles. Nuestra oficina está utilizando una serie de estrategias exitosas para reducir este aumento. Hoy anuncio que mi oficina, una vez más, toma medidas presentando una demanda de reducción de molestias contra los presuntos propietarios y operadores de un edificio de apartamentos en el sur de Los Ángeles. Sostenemos que es un bastión para violenta pandilla Avalon 40s y que se ha permitido que el edificio se convierta en un punto álgido para la violencia. dos tiroteos están relacionados con la propiedad junto con numerosos arrestos por posesión ilegal de armas y el descubrimiento de una gran colección de armas y municiones. El edificio está a menos de 1,000 pies de 2 escuelas y 2 parques. A medida que los estudiantes regresan a la escuela, es importante recordar que los niños deben estar seguros no solo dentro de la escuela, sino también en su camino a la escuela. Es por eso que estamos tomando medidas decisivas para cerrar este peligroso centro de pandillas para siempre. Happy to take questions. Margaret.
Is it believed that any of the other 5 units, any of the students may be involved in any of this?
So I'll repeat your question because we're outside and it was hard for people to hear. So Margaret asks, I mentioned that there was one unit that is vacant that we allege is being used by gang members to stash weapons, that sort of thing. Do I know whether other of the units are occupied by actual members of the gang involved in violent activity? I can't say that as I'm standing here right now. I can say that our effort with the owner of the property, with whom we hope to be able to do this collaboratively, which happens many times in these cases, will work with us to assure there are house rules and tenants are screened and there's security at the property. So irrespective of so the physical changes and the operational changes can bring a level of safety to the community. Other questions? Hi, Chris. Yeah.
Are you saying that the building has openly allowed this to happen or that the building has not taken any action?
What we're saying is, thank you, we're saying that we're alleging that the owners and operators of this building, as is the case in so many other properties in neighborhoods that are dangerous in Los Angeles, has allowed the building to be used this way without taking any of the range of actions well within their power to prevent this activity from happening. And I've delineated with some specificity a number of changes that the owners and operators could have taken yesterday, or 2 months ago, or a long time ago. Now, remember, I mentioned that we're alleging that one of the defendants, who is the alleged trustee of this property, is an individual who himself has a criminal record that includes weapons issues. So at the end of the day, one way or the other, either through the collaboration that we hope to achieve with the owner of the property, operator of the property, or through a court proceeding, the kids who live in this neighborhood, we're going to be able to walk by this building and not see gang graffiti scrawled on the sidewalk reminding them about who's in charge. That's not right. Yeah, Maury? Then we pursue a judicial proceeding. The chief mentioned earlier, we're going to pursue getting an injunction that orders the owners and operators to create the conditions of success for safety at this location. These are among the things that we're going to be seeking, correct? Yeah. So the question was, is it possible that trustees or owners are involved with the gang? We're not alleging that at this point. I can't say that that's true. I can say that they have a responsibility to the neighborhood in which they are located. This building, as every property owner, as the chief mentioned earlier, property owners in Los Angeles, the lion's share of whom are operating not only lawfully, but trying to do their best to make sure their neighborhoods are moving up. Every property owner has an obligation to assure they're not part of a problem that is deteriorating safety in the very community where they've invested their money. Yeah. Yes. We have the complaint available to you, and you'll see in the complaint that we've alleged that we have reached out previously to the alleged owners and operators of the property, so a few months ago actually, to try to create the kind of conditions that would lead us to not have to file a lawsuit like this. In fact, we did so before we filed the lawsuit. See, this is the thing about the practice that we're engaged in here. This work has one goal. Let's change the conditions and create safety in these neighborhoods. We reached out, as we do again and again, to the people who we've alleged are the owners and operators of the property to try to get a level of cooperation so a lawsuit wasn't necessary. I'm hopeful that now the lawsuit is filed that we'll achieve the cooperation we sought to get informally at the beginning. We didn't get the cooperation that we had sought. Now I'm hoping we do. The question was, how do the owners become owners? Did they purchase it? I don't know the history of the ownership of the property. All right. Mr. Tannheiser.
What's the status of that now? Have you received any kind of referral from the LAPD? What's going on with that?
So, Dave, as far as I know, we haven't received any referrals yet. Thank you. The chief has said they've been referred to the DA's office, so we haven't seen them yet.
Have they already been referred to the DA?
Chief?
So changing gears, the question was, there was an incident on the council floor, a very unfortunate and terrible incident in which during a debate by the council relative to Action to 4118 of the LEMC that goes to the city's enforcement efforts of the use of public walkways and so forth, that opponents of that were vocal and present and exercising, in many instances, their First Amendment rights. Unfortunately, there were others, though, that escalated that matter and became involved in physical violence, including violence against police officers. It resulted in the arrest of one individual and then another individual attempting to take custody of that individual away from a lawful arrest. The individual that we're currently pursuing against one individual who was previously identified, a felony count of charges involving his resistance as well as his involvement with officers as they attempted to take him into custody, and then a second individual who attempted to take custody of that individual and remove him from a lawful arrest has been identified, and we're currently attempting to locate that individual, and we'll seek charges against that individual as well. The felony charges are the individual who was arrested had bailed out after his arrest, $50,000 bail, and is awaiting arraignment, and I look forward to the district attorney's office and their evaluation and filing of charges. That what occurred on the council floor ought to embarrass every advocate who is attempting to hear their voices to be heard. Those that advocated for that violence by their own remarks and continued presence, that's not the way in which we operate a democracy. That's the way in which we lose a democracy. So I'm very keen as a chief to look and see what follow-up actions are going to be taken relative to the prosecution of the individuals who not just crossed a boundary, but leapt over it and pursued it. And absent our presence, I believe, would have threatened and potentially injured elected members of the city council. We have the identity of a second individual. We know who that individual is, and that person is currently wanted on other charges. The individual's out on I believe, a felony warrant or two, and we're actively looking for that individual. And should that person come to our view, and they'll be arrested, and charges against that individual are also being pursued relative to their actions on the council floor. The second individual who was arrested bailed out, and pursuant to the due process will await an arraignment. And during that period of time, the district attorney's office is evaluating our request for felony filings for the charges and for the conduct that was that we sustained. We had officers that, while unfortunate, only suffered minor injuries. The amount of conflict of this was not a minor matter. This was not just a brush up of some verbal tit for tat. This escalated, and but for the fact that we had tens of officers that were there that responded, acted professionally, restored order throughout without having to resort to some type of significant use of force. But for their presence, we would have lost that council, and its control would have gone to these errant individuals who somehow believe that it's acceptable in this city to conduct themselves in that manner.
Correct. That's right. Thank you, everybody, very much. Terrific.